Can everybody hear me? Is the sound good back there? Okay. It's a real honor to be here, and it's kind of fun for me because I don't get up this direction very often, so it's fun. I enjoyed the drive even up here, so good to be here. And the view across the way is kind of miserable, I know, but no, it's really quite a location. And I was delighted to hear the reading of that statement by the church. As we live in a time when there have been some public statements about seeming to limit the religious liberty of Muslims in the United States. And the church came out with that statement, and I was very impressed by it. It said, we are neutral on partisan political matters, but we are not neutral as regards religious liberty. I was really pleased to hear that. I was delighted, very pleased to see that statement. I think it's very important, and I really enjoyed the stories that were told about these sorts of interfaith service efforts. To me, that's extraordinarily important. I feel passionately about that. I think interfaith dialogue is really, really important. Even more important is interfaith community service and that sort of thing that really unites us as human beings. Now, my job tonight is to talk very quickly and sort of lay out some basic ideas about Islam, some basic principles. I never know what people know, and it may be that all of you are very, very knowledgeable about Islam. But I found sometimes when I presume that people know something, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And sometimes I've been surprised when the first question was something like, well, was Muhammad a Christian? And okay, I really, underestimated or, what people would know, or overestimated what people would know. So what I'm going to try to do for about 15 or 20 minutes, I'll try to be fast. I'm going to try to set the stage for Professor Hummel's presentation, and I'm going to try, as a Latter-day Saint Islamicist, there aren't that many of us, but there are a few, I'm going to try to lay out some basic things about Islam that I hope will set the stage for him. And so what I'm going to do is lay out some basic Islamic ideas and elements of the history and so on. I mean, 15, 20 minutes, what can you do? It's a civilization that's almost a millennium and a half old, and that extends from Indonesia to Morocco and at one point up even in Spain, with a lot of different cultures and a lot of complexities and so on. So I'm going to be oversimplifying with a vengeance. It's going to be embarrassingly oversimplified. But we'll call it what C.S. Lewis might have called the Mere Islam, okay? Just very basic things. So, and I'm going to make some Mormon comparisons along the way, because this audience, I presume, is majority Latter-day Saint. Islam begins in the sense of the religion that we call Islam today. I mean, Islam, Muslims would tell you, began with the creation of the earth. That it starts off, Islam is the primordial revelation. Mormons can understand this, because we see history as being sort of dispensational, an initial revelation, then periods of apostasy, as it were, with revelation, restoration, and so on. Islamic views of history are much like that. But Islam, the historical religion that we call Islam, begins with the revelation, with the appearance of the angel Gabriel, according to the traditional story, to the Prophet Muhammad. And here you have an illustration, which, by the way, refutes some ideas that you sometimes hear. It is said that you cannot depict the Prophet Muhammad. Well, some schools of thought say you can. But some, like this one, the one that produced this, say you can, obviously. There he is. Now, some versions will have Muhammad represented but with his face veiled, or with the face blank, or with the head replaced by a flame, a kind of like a halo to indicate the sanctity of the person. The angel Gabriel, according to tradition, comes to the Prophet Muhammad in about the year 610, begins the revelation of the holy book of Islam, the Quran, which serves the role in Islam something like the Bible in Christianity. Now, in some ways that's comparable, and people have compared it to the first vision of Joseph Smith, which begins the restoration of the gospel as Latter-day Saints understand it. Already here, though, you see similarities and differences. You have a post-biblical prophet in each case. But the substance of the revelation is different. I won't say totally different, because there are strong similarities in many ways. But one of the strong differences is this. In the story of Joseph Smith's first vision, he sees God and the Son, Jesus Christ. Two divine beings, separate, embodied beings. That is not a teaching of Islam. But it was common, I'll say this very quickly, it was common in the 19th century particularly, but even into the 20th, for critics and even a few scholars to make the comparison between Islam and Mormonism, sort of a cottage industry, to say, you know, Mormonism is the Islam of America. You have a post-biblical prophet, and you have polygamy. I mean, the kind of stuff that really thrilled Victorian audiences, right? So, first vision and Muhammad's prophetic call, a point of contact, similarities and differences, and you'll find similarities and differences all along the way. So, now the holy book of Islam is called the Quran, which means something like a book of readings or a book of recitations. The verb qara in Arabic means to read or to recite. In the earliest days, there probably was no difference because you always read aloud. So it is a book of readings, a book of recitations. And there you have an example of the Arabic text of the Quran, one of the pages of the Quran. Let me say something about the nature of the Quran. It is conceived of as having been revealed by God through Muhammad. It is not Muhammad's composition. It's not a story about Muhammad. It's not the life of Muhammad. It's not even an inspired book written by Muhammad. It is revelations of God transmitted through Muhammad. Muhammad is the conduit, the pipeline through whom the revelation comes. It's considered to be, by almost all Muslims, inerrant, particularly in the original Arabic. In translation, well, they often won't even call it the Quran. There's no rule against translating the Quran. You can do it. But it's not the Quran when it's not in Arabic. You'll often see books, translations entitled something like The Meaning of the Glorious Quran, or The Quran Interpreted, or something like that. Now, one other thing, because I think I need to say this to help set up Professor Hummel's remarks, is the Quran is typically and traditionally divided into two parts. The Meccan portion of the Quran, the earliest parts, and the Medinan portion, because Muhammad's career as a prophet falls into two pieces. One part in his native city of Mecca, and then the second part, the latter part, in the city of Medina, originally called Yathrib. It becomes known as Medinat al-Nabi, or Al-Medina, the city of the prophet, and so on. And in that city, his role is different. He starts off as a voice crying in the wilderness, as it were, a prophet. When he moves to Medina, he becomes the ruler of a community, which is really important. And it gives Islam that sort of political dimension that Islam has retained ever since. And the nature of the revelations he receives differs between Mecca and Medina. In Mecca, you have a lot of emphasis on the last days, the judgment, our accountability morally before God, and so on. In the Medinan portion of the Quran, the chapters are longer, the verses are longer, and they tend to have to do with issues that would come up when you're trying to run a community. They have to do with the questions of inheritance and how to govern a community and so on. It's no oversimplification, but even in Arabic Qurans today, you will see chapters of the Quran designated as either Meccan or Medinan. And that's a really important fundamental distinction that is adopted by non-Muslim scholars as well. If I were going to compare the Quran to anything in the LDS understanding, I'd say it's not like the Bible really in a lot of ways. The Bible is a kind of library. Even in the original Greek, the word Bible is plural. It's ta biblia, the books. So it's poetry, it's historical works, it's letters, it's collections of proverbs and so on, and it's written by multiple authors. Many of the passages are narrative passages telling stories. It's not like the Book of Mormon either, because the Book of Mormon is essentially a history with things embedded in it. Sermons and letters and all those sorts of things. It's more like the Doctrine and Covenants in the LDS understanding. The Doctrine and Covenants is a collection of revelations given through the prophet Joseph Smith and a couple of others, but mostly through the prophet Joseph Smith. And those revelations are arranged more or less in a chronological order. And Section 88 of the Doctrine and Covenants has no necessary connection with Section 87 before it or Section 89 after it. They just happen to be in that order. The same thing is true of the Quran. So if you pick it up expecting to read a story, by and large you won't get that. There are some passages that do tell stories. There's one entire chapter devoted, for example, the Surah Yusuf, to the biblical patriarch Joseph in Egypt, telling much the same story as you find in the book of Genesis. But on the whole, it's a collection of revelations or readings, things to be read. Okay, so President Kimball used to say that one way to order your thoughts, if you ever had to explain Mormonism to anybody, was to learn the 13 Articles of Faith. Just go through those. It provides a sort of orderly exposition of the gospel. You can do a similar thing with the 5 pillars of Islam. So that's how I've chosen to do things today. And I've already forgotten when I started. How much time do I have?
7 minutes is what you've done.
I've done 7 minutes? Good, I still have 13.
You got plenty of time.
Okay, you can tell. I talk fast naturally, but I'm really trying to cram a lot of stuff in here. 1,500 years of history, you know, a world culture, etc., etc. The 5 pillars of Islam they don't exhaust Islam, but they cover a lot of what you need to know in a few-minute presentation. And so I just want to read them off right now. Well, let me just go back to that. Can we? All right. Here they are. These are the 5 pillars. The Shahada, the testimony is what it really means. The profession of faith. Salat or prayer, Psalm or fasting, Zakat or almsgiving, and the Hajj or the pilgrimage. Okay, now let's talk about them independently. The Shahada is the profession of faith, or testimony. If you, what was the previous slide? I do want to talk about it, so let's leave that for a second. If you recite the profession of faith in Arabic, you say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah. Okay, I testify there is no God, small g God, and Muhammad is but God, capital G God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. I want to say something about that word Allah right now, because a lot of people are under the impression that Allah is some sort of foreign godling. That if you worship Allah, you're worshiping a different God than the Christian God. It's like worshiping Zeus or Apollo or Minerva or something like that. You have to understand that the Arabic word for God is Allah, period. If you're a Christian, you speak Arabic, use the word Allah. If you read Genesis 1:1 in Arabic, it's in the beginning Allah created the heavens and the earth, all right? If you read John 1:1 in Arabic, it's in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Allah, and the Word was Allah, okay? If you recite the first article of faith in Arabic, we believe in Allah, the Eternal Father, and His Son, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Ghost. You can't get around this. The word that's used in the Arabic translation of the Doctrine and Covenants in the Book of Mormon. So I hear people sometimes say, particularly our evangelical friends, who will say things like, well, if you worship Allah, you're going to hell. Well, that's bad news for millions of Arabic-speaking Christians. Because they don't have any other word to use. That's the word they have to use. That is the Arabic word for God. And I want to take it apart and explain to you that it's related to a word we all know. You can see it right there. Allah is a contraction of 2 words. Al, meaning the. Almost any word that begins with al in English comes from Arabic. Alcohol, ironically. Algebra. Algorithm, Aldebaran, the star name, lots and lots of names. They come from Arabic. Alchemy. These words come from Arabic because al is the definite article, the. So what Allah is, it means in Arabic, the God. It's like capitalizing God. Arabic doesn't have capital letters. But when you say al-ilah, you mean the God, the one true God, as opposed to the false gods that are out there. Now, take that I-L-A-H, ilah, which means small g, God. Compare it to Elohim. That's a word you all know. If you take off the I-M ending, which is a masculine plural ending in Hebrew, it's very interesting in and of itself. You take that off, you've got that word Eloh, which is very much like ilah, because Arabic and Hebrew are cousin languages. It's like English God and German Gott, okay? They're cognate languages. So when Muslims, or for that matter, Arabic-speaking Christians are worshiping Allah, they're worshiping the God that we know under the name of Allah, or Elohim rather, or the God that we simply call God. Okay, let's go to the next. Here's that declaration of faith. I testify there is no God, small g, but the God. There's no ilah, but Allah, okay? And Muhammad is his messenger. I want to take that apart because this is fundamental. I'll spend more time on this pillar than on the others. This is what you do if you recite it with real intent, preferably with witnesses and so on, under certain circumstances. This makes you a Muslim, all right? There's no baptism, there are no priests or ordinances or anything like that. If you recite this with real intent, you are a Muslim. I'll come back to what Muslim means in just a second. These are some basic things we all need